And before I get started, happy Father's Day. They're all grinning. Oh, it's a wonderful day to celebrate. Now, having said that, today's presentation actually, where the title seems almost overwhelming, and the title is Devachan and Avichi, the two great states of human consciousness after death, sounds a little scary. I hope by the end of the talk this morning, you will feel a lot more comfortable about death. And you'll learn more than you ever knew you could learn. So let me begin. Throughout the ageless wisdom teachings, there are certain terms that do appear mysterious, almost forbidding, until one begins to perceive the psychology and the spiritual science hidden within them. Two such terms are Devachan and Avichi. They stand as opposites in the teaching. One represents a state of spiritual assimilation, peace, and luminous fulfillment. And the other symbolizing the terrible isolation produced by extreme materialism, separateness, and conscious evil. Both were given by the teachings in order to deepen our understanding of consciousness and karma and the spark's long journey toward release from the wheel of rebirth. The term Devachan comes from the Tibetan roots and is often translated as the abode of the gods, or, and my favorite is the happy land. In the teachings of Helena Petrovna Blavatsky, Devachan is described as a post-mortem state of blissful, subjective existence entered after death by the average human being. It is not a locality in space, but a condition of consciousness in which the higher aspirations, the noble affections, spiritual ideals, and unfulfilled beauty of earthly life blossom into experience. Devachan is a state of rest. It is a state of assimilation where the soul digests spiritual values gained during incarnation. Now, Avichi, by contrast, is described as the state without waves, a condition devoid of spiritual vibration and inner harmony. In theosophical literature, it is sometimes referred to as the most terrible state possible for human consciousness, a condition resulting from deliberate and sustained identification with evil, hatred, cruelty, or total denial of the spiritual principle. But it is essential to understand from the beginning that Avichi is not an eternal hell. The ageless wisdom rejects the doctrine of everlasting damnation. Avichi is a state generated by consciousness itself, temporary, though terrible, and governed entirely by karmic law. These teachings are not merely descriptions of life after death. They are descriptions of states of consciousness that humanity experiences even while they are still in the body, in incarnation. Devachan and Avichi exist embryonically in the daily life. Every noble thought builds Devachanic substance. Every act of cruelty or conscious separateness touches the edge of Avichi. Thus, these teachings are practical and immediate. They ask us not merely what happens after death, but what kind of world we are building within ourselves now. According to Blavatsky, the human being is a composite entity. What she means by that is that our personality life is temporary, but the spark, the reincarnating soul, endures through many lives. After physical death, the lower energies gradually separate from the higher. The emotional and mental residues dissipate according to their quality, while the higher essence of experience is retained by the soul. Devachan becomes the field in which the soul assimilates the purest and most spiritual elements gathered during earthly incarnation. One of the compassionate aspects of the teaching is that Devachan is deeply individual. Each soul experiences there the fulfillment of the highest inner longing. The mother whose love was selfless may experience the presence of those she cherished. The artist may dwell in exquisite beauty. The aspirant who sought wisdom may find luminous instruction. But these are not objective environments in the ordinary sense. They are woven from the soul's own noblest energies. So Devachan is therefore not reward. It is the flowering of consciousness according to immutable law. Blavatsky repeatedly emphasized that Devachan is not illusion in a trivial sense. Students often misunderstand this point. Because the experiences are subjective, some assume they are therefore not real. Yet from the esoteric perspective, consciousness itself is the ultimate reality. Human beings already live largely within self-created mental worlds, in their imaginations. Devachan simply reveals this truth in purified form. There, freed temporarily from dense matter, consciousness unfolds its deepest tendencies with remarkable clarity and intensity. Agni Yoga expands this understanding beautifully. The books of Nicholas Roerich and Helena Roerich continually remind us that the subtle world is not remote. Humanity exists simultaneously in multiple worlds, though ordinary awareness perceives only the physical. Thought itself is a creative energy linking these worlds continuously. Therefore, Devachan is not an arbitrary post-mortem reward, but a lawful continuation of energies cultivated during earthly existence. Agni Yoga teaches that lofty thought creates luminous forms in subtle matter. Every selfless aspiration strengthens the bridge to the higher worlds. The heart saturated with beauty, service, courage, and striving naturally gravitates toward harmonious states after death. The Agni yogi who has a trained, disciplined consciousness toward light already carries Devachan within the subtle fabric of their being. One of the most inspiring aspects of Agni Yoga is its assertion that spiritual evolution is not escape from life, but transformation through labor, service, and fiery striving. I was thinking, I don't want to interrupt myself much here because I have quite a bit to share, but I was thinking of a young member of the group, a friend of the group, who died early. And her husband said she looked so beautiful after she had died. This is an example of what it means to have Devachan within your being, within your consciousness. The teaching repeatedly warns against passive spirituality. Devachan itself is not the final goal. It is a period of assimilation for further evolution. There are further states beyond Devachan, which I'm not talking about today. Also, there's a state lower than Avichi, which is, again, a state I will not be talking about today. These are the two most important states of consciousness after death, Devachan and Avichi. Even the most blissful states of the higher worlds eventually must be transcended. The soul returns again to incarnation because growth requires experience, service, and conscious participation in evolution. We don't just evolve. We have to strive and work toward it. This truth, removes fear from death. Death becomes neither annihilation nor arbitrary judgment, but a rhythmic transition in a vast continuum of life. The age's wisdom views death much as sleep is viewed in relation to waking life. But as the body requires rest and assimilation, so consciousness requires periods of withdrawal between incarnation. Devachan represents this rhythmic restoration. Yet alongside this luminous teaching stands this stark warning embodied in the idea of Avichi. Blavatsky was careful to say that Avichi is exceedingly rare. Most human beings do not enter such a state. Ordinary selfishness, ignorance, or moral weakness are not sufficient causes. Avichi results from conscious spiritual corruption. And those are important words to think about. Conscious spiritual corruption. A deliberate alliance with destructive forces against the good of humanity and against the good of the soul. Why is this state called without waves? Esoterically, waves symbolize vibration and rhythm and life itself. Spiritual consciousness is dynamic, interconnected, and responsive. Avichi represents the condition in which consciousness becomes sealed within itself through extreme separateness. You can take this word separateness and read it throughout the ageless wisdom teachings. Separateness, separativeness, divisiveness, all will remind you, words, actions, activities that will remind you this is what leads a person to Avichi. One's soul's connection to higher harmonies is nearly extinguished. One experiences the terrible isolation created by hatred, malice, and deliberate rejection of truth. The Agni Yoga books frequently warn about the poison of separateness. They teach that isolation from the stream of evolution produces suffering, not because of divine punishment, but because, reality itself is founded upon unity. The universe lives through cooperation, hierarchy, interdependence, and communion. To oppose these principles consciously is to oppose the very current of life. There are passages in Agni Yoga that describe darkened consciousness as becoming incapable of perceiving light. Such beings imprison themselves within their own emanations. This closely parallels the theosophical understanding of Avichi. One need not imagine medieval, we are without air conditioning today, and I'm really feeling it, so I apologize for this. One need not imagine medieval infernos or external torture. The agency of Avichi lies precisely in the state of consciousness itself. A consciousness cut off from meaning, cut off from beauty, cut off from love, and cut off from spiritual relationship. I'm sure we can all relate now to specific people throughout history who Avichi describes. Importantly, the teaching insists that suffering itself can eventually become transformative. Even the darkest condition is not eternal. Evolution continues because the divine essence within every being can never be utterly destroyed, with one exception. The journey may be terribly prolonged, but the law of life ultimately works toward reintegration and awakening. Students of the teaching should therefore avoid melodrama regarding Avichi. Some become fascinated by dark entities or catastrophic punishments. Such fascination itself can lower consciousness. Humanity must understand the consequences of consciousness. Thought matters. Motive matters. Every choice contributes to the architecture of the lower and higher bodies and future experience. In practical terms, Devachan and Avichi can be understood as polarities toward which daily life moves. Whenever we cultivate gratitude and beauty and compassion and aspiration, we are participating in Devachanic energies. Whenever bitterness, cruelty, hatred, or deliberate deception dominate a person's thinking, They move towards states of inner disintegration. One of the keynotes of Agni Yoga is its teaching of the heart. The heart is presented not only as an emotional center, but as an organ of spiritual and intuitive perception. The fiery heart links humanity with higher worlds. Through the heart, one senses truth directly. A purified heart magnetizes luminous energies and creates harmony in both visible and invisible worlds. Our teaching is deeply connected with Devachan. The person who has cultivated their heart enters the subtle worlds with far greater clarity and beauty. The after-death condition is not arbitrary. It reflects the quality of consciousness that we developed while in incarnation. Therefore, the spiritual life is not preparation for some distant heaven, but construction of subtle reality now. Blavatsky often challenged conventional religious notions because she wished humanity to outgrow fear-based morality. Fear-based morality. Fear cannot produce true spirituality. Only understanding can do so. The law of karma is educational. It is not vindictive. Devachan is not payment for obedience, nor is Avichi punishment from an angry deity. Both arise from natural law as inevitably as physical effects follow physical causes. This view restores dignity and responsibility to the human being, to us. We are participants in cosmic evolution, not helpless subjects awaiting eternal judgment. Each thought radiates energy. Each action shapes consciousness. The future worlds are built gradually through present living. Agni Yoga especially emphasizes responsibility for thought. The teaching states repeatedly that thoughts are things. They generate forms. Think of this. I know you have experienced it. I have experienced it so many times that thought generates form. Not always perfect forms, but manifest. Our thoughts will manifest in form, for good or bad. Currents within subtle matter. Hostile thinking pollutes space, while benevolent thought strengthens the world. Thus, Devachan is not suddenly manufactured after death. It is slowly woven from years of aspiration, beauty, sacrifice, and loving service. Likewise, Avichi is not entered accidentally. It results from repeated choices against the soul. This should encourage rather than terrify us. The ordinary sincere seeker, even with their many imperfections, is not moving toward Avichi. Human weakness is one thing. Conscious spiritual corruption is another. Indeed, one of the most hopeful themes in both Blavatsky and Agni Yoga writings is the immense compassion of cosmic law. Evolution is patient beyond human comprehension. The soul is given repeated opportunities across many incarnations. Failures become lessons. Pain becomes instruction. Even karma itself is fundamentally restorative. Another important insight concerns attachment. Devachan, beautiful as it is, remains part of conditioned existence. The soul eventually exhausts the energies that sustain the Devachanic state and returns to rebirth. This reminds me in a book called Other Worlds by Torkim Saradarian. In one of the chapters, he gives a letter for those attending a funeral of their loved one, where the officiant reads the letter to the one who has passed on, reminding them that when they hear the call, they must return into incarnation. What he is telling them is, you must leave Devachan. You must leave that beautiful place and come back, because it's a spot between each incarnation, which is a rest time, and then we must come back into incarnation to evolve. Even the bliss of Devachan is incomplete if divorced from service and greater or further growth. The great ones renounce absorption in heavenly states in order to aid humanity. Agni Yoga repeatedly exalts this ideal of service. The highest consciousness seeks not personal escape, but participation in the upliftment of the world. Therefore, we must not become spiritually self-centered, dreaming only of post-mortem peace. The higher path calls for fiery labor on behalf of humanity. So in this sense, Devachan itself may be viewed as preparation rather than destination. The soul gathers strength there before returning to the difficult but sacred school of earth. Incarnation is not punishment. It is opportunity. The world is the field where consciousness becomes self-aware through struggle, love, creativity, and sacrifice. The teaching also encourages a healthier relationship with death itself. Modern civilization often hides death behind fear and denial. Yet fear of death cripples spiritual perception. The ageless wisdom asks humanity to understand death as transition. Nothing essential is lost. Consciousness continues. Love continues. The soul continues its pilgrimage. Blavatsky taught that noble spiritual bonds endure because they belong to the higher state of being. Agni Yoga likewise affirms the continuity of consciousness and the reality of subtle communion. This understanding can bring tremendous consolation. The apparent separation of earthly life are temporary within the vast continuity of spirit. At the same time, the teachings place tremendous emphasis on present responsibility. One cannot postpone spirituality until after death. The subtle worlds merely reveal more clearly what has already been cultivated inwardly. Therefore, daily thought, speech, and action are vitally important. Daily thought, speech, and action. The student of Agni Yoga should ask continually, what kind of inner atmosphere am I building? Am I strengthening harmony or discord? Am I increasing light or obscuration? Every moment becomes significant when viewed from the perspective of conscious evolution. Agni Yoga speaks often of joy, not superficial pleasure, but spiritual joy born of striving. Such a joy has tremendous esoteric significance. Joy magnetizes higher energies. Joy strengthens subtle bodies. Joy is close to the fiery essence of life itself. A consciousness imbued with courageous joy naturally approaches luminous states. Naturally approaches luminous states. This is why the teachers consistently emphasize beauty. Beauty refines our subtle nature. Beauty harmonizes consciousness with higher realities. Music, art, noble literature, selfless service, reverence for nature, compassionate action, all these help construct the inner world that later unfolds more fully after death. Students sometimes wonder whether Devachan delays spiritual progress because it is blissful and subjective. Yet from the esoteric viewpoint, assimilation is essential. Just as digestion transforms physical nourishment into usable energy, Devachan transforms experience into soul quality. This soul quality becomes part of the chalice of the heart. Without assimilation, evolution would become chaotic and fragmented. The higher adepts, however, the higher adepts transcend the ordinary Devachanic cycle because they maintain continuity of consciousness across states. For the average human being, consciousness is fragmented. We are awake on the physical plane, partially conscious in dreams, largely unconscious during deep sleep, and ordinarily unaware of the transitions between life and death and rebirth. But the adept, through long discipline over many incarnations, gradually builds an unbroken thread of awareness that persists through all planes of existence. Death for the adept is no more disruptive than passing from one room into another. The continuity of the inner identity remains intact. I couldn't help but think of this, let's call it law, when reading about the passing of Helena Rourke and thinking about the passing of our own teacher, Torcom. It's just for them, it's like going from one room into another. They are adepts. Helena Rourke was a Tara and the mother of Agni Yoga. According to the writings of Helena Blavatsky, the adept has consciously united the personality with the higher ego, and therefore no longer requires the same prolonged Devachanic assimilation experienced by ordinary humanity. The adept has already assimilated the lessons of life while still in incarnation. Because consciousness has become illumined and self-aware, there is less separation between their waking life, the subtle worlds, and the spiritual worlds. Such beings remain active servants of evolution, even after physical death, consciously laboring for humanity on the subtle planes. The Agni Yoga teachings deepen this idea by emphasizing the fiery expansion of consciousness. The adepts are described not as remote supernatural beings, but as those who have refined the heart to such a degree that it can sustain the higher fires of spirit without disintegration. They have developed what Agni Yoga calls straight knowledge, an immediate perception of truth beyond ordinary reasoning. Their awareness functions simultaneously in several worlds because they have learned to harmonize the dense physical body, the subtle body, and the spiritual consciousness into one coordinated instrument of service. For such advanced souls, Devachan is no longer entered unconsciously as a dreamlike state. Instead, they move through the subtle worlds with full awareness and purpose. Some may even voluntarily renounce prolonged blissful states in order to remain near humanity and assist in the evolution of Earth. This is one reason the Ageless Wisdom speaks so reverently of the great teachers and guardians of humanity. Their compassion binds them to the struggles of the world until humanity itself advances further along the path. Agni Yoga repeatedly teaches that the mark of true advancement is not psychic display, but increased responsibility, humility, courage, and service. The adept is not seeking personal liberation alone. The farther one advances spiritually, the greater becomes the sense of unity with all life. So the liberated consciousness willingly bears part of the burden of the world. The teaching often presents this as the law of hierarchy. Those who have gone ahead extend help to those who follow behind. The spiritually awakened individual therefore becomes increasingly aware in both physical and subtle worlds through purification of motive, refinement of thought, disciplined labor, and fiery aspiration. The expansion of consciousness occurs naturally as the heart becomes more selfless and receptive to higher energies. In Agni Yoga, the bridge to the higher worlds is built not through escape from earthly duties and responsibilities, but through transforming daily life into conscious spiritual activity and service. Blavatsky also warns students not to romanticize the state of the adept. The path requires enormous self-mastery, sacrifice, and endurance. The higher consciousness cannot safely unfold and a nature still dominated by selfishness or emotional instability. This is why both Theosophy and Agni Yoga emphasize ethical purification before spiritual development. Ethical purification before spiritual development. The adept is not merely one who knows more, but one who has become more compassionate, more disciplined, more fearless, and more aligned with the divine purpose. Ultimately, the adepts stand as evidence of humanity's future potential. They demonstrate what consciousness can become when fully awakened. Their existence affirms one of the central teachings of the age's wisdom, that evolution is leading humanity toward expanded awareness, conscious immortality, and eventual cooperation with the greater work of cosmic evolution itself. Ultimately, both Devachan and Avichi reveal the extraordinary creative power of consciousness. Human beings are not passive recipients of fate. We are creators within the universal process. Heaven and hell are not merely places, but conditions of being generated through relationship with truth, beauty, love, and unity, or their opposition. The teaching, therefore, calls humanity toward conscious evolution. Every act of kindness contributes to the architecture of light. Every effort toward self-mastery strengthens the bridge to higher worlds. Every noble thought helps redeem not only oneself, but humanity as a whole. In closing, we may say that Devachan represents the soul's capacity for luminous fulfillment, while Avichi represents the suffering born from radical separation from the spiritual current of life. Consciousness is destined ultimately for illumination, wisdom, and union with the divine source. The purpose of these teachings is not to stimulate fear regarding the afterlife, but to awaken reverence for consciousness now. The invisible worlds are already near. Humanity lives surrounded by subtle realities shaped continuously by thought and motive. So each day offers an opportunity to build light within yourself and within the world. The great ones continually remind humanity that the future is created in the present moment. If we would enter luminous states hereafter, we must begin by cultivating a luminous conscious soul through service, beauty, courage, compassion, discipline, and fiery striving. The human being gradually becomes an illumined being of the higher worlds, even while walking on the earth. And perhaps this is the deepest message hidden within the teachings on Devachan and Avichi, that eternity is not far away. It is being fashioned within us, thought by thought, choice by choice, hour by hour, as the soul slowly learns to radiate the light of the Spirit into every realm of existence. Thank you.